Hello and welcome to another episode of Recovery for the Narcissist podcast. I am your host, Dr. Eric Perry. If you are a first-time listener, I would like to let you know that this podcast is specifically for those who experience or exhibit narcissistic tendencies in their daily life. That does not mean that individuals who have experienced negative and harmful effects by a narcissist will not benefit from listening. In today's podcast, I would like to discuss the topic of narcissistic rage. Narcissistic rage is defined as an unexpected and uncontrollable expression of anger that is caused by a narcissistic injury. A narcissistic injury often occurs as a result of any threat to the self-worth or self-esteem of a narcissistic individual. It can also occur as a result of any threat to the confidence or sense of self of the narcissistic person. As we know, narcissistic individuals tend to be internally and emotionally fragile, even though this is not how they tend to present themselves to the outside world. Narcissistic rage occurs on a continuum. This means that the behavior can range from sudden and intense outbursts to passive-aggressive acts such as neglect or sarcasm. The difference between narcissistic rage and normal anger is that it tends to be much more unreasonable and disproportionate to what would typically be expected. Narcissistic rage can also present as highly aggressive behavior, even if the aggression is passive. This simply means that the aggressive behavior may happen at a later time or in a subtle way. And as I always say, making positive adjustments for narcissistic tendencies always begins with awareness. Here are some examples of when you might feel triggered into a narcissistic rage. 1. If you are criticized. 2. If you don't get your way. 3. If you are not the center of attention. 4. If you are not in control of your surroundings. 5. If you are called out for breaking a rule or a social norm. 6. If you are asked to take responsibility for your actions. And 7. If your credibility is challenged. I must note that this list only represents some of the potential reasons why you might be overtaken by a narcissistic rage episode. It is not uncommon for someone with narcissistic tendencies to feel overwhelmed by the seemingly daunting task of not having narcissistic episodes. This is because the person with narcissistic tendencies, more often than not, feels that it is only after the episode that they are able to recognize they were even triggered. And yes, this tends to be true. However, this is not an excuse to neglect setting positive and meaningful intentions to take appropriate actions when a narcissistic rage moment occurs. Before we dive into the steps to take whenever you experience a narcissistic rage episode, let's look at the harmful effects that your rage can have on someone else. Individuals who are on the receiving end of narcissistic rage episodes will likely develop a deep sense of mistrust and fear towards the narcissistic person. They will feel the need to protect themselves. Victims of narcissistic rage episodes will question their sanity, feel worthless, feel abandoned, be overly critical of themselves, make excuses for the behavior of the narcissist, and doubt their own ability to accomplish life goals. If you are here listening to this podcast and believe you have narcissistic tendencies, I am more than certain that this is not how you would like those you care about to feel. You are here because you want to have better relationships, connect with people you care about, and live a more fulfilling life. Here are some things to think about the next time you realize you had or are having a narcissistic rage episode. Do not be discouraged if your only awareness that you had a narcissistic rage episode is after the fact. Recognizing that you had one at any point is the first step to bringing more awareness to yourself about this behavioral habit that you have formed. Keeping yourself informed that you may have narcissistic rage episodes is most important. Remind yourself on days even when you aren't thinking about it. Here is something else to consider. Let someone who you trust know that you're working on having less of these episodes. Accountability is extremely important. Give them permission to check in on you about it, and don't be defensive when they do. If you find yourself in the midst of an episode, step away. Create some space between you and those around you, and change the environment. Go for a walk, listen to music, exercise, cook. Do anything that doesn't involve engaging with other people. Consider this as your cooling down period. Once you have grounded yourself, you can re-engage with others, but be mindful and take it slow. Don't be discouraged if you don't get it right the first time, or even the 5th time. Just keep trying. The most important thing is that you make a conscious effort to work on these things. Keep going. and never give up. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Recovery for the Narcissist podcast. I am your host, Dr. Eric Perry. Until next time, see you soon.